Yes, yes. Welcome to the ancient world of tabletop games. I am Agamemnon from the historical documentary Time Bandits. This is a report from a fugitive. I must return to the business of business and the topic of sales. Black Friday doesn't mean terribly much on this side of the Atlantic. The only faces pressed against shop window glass on a Friday are drunken ones around midnight, but that could be any Friday. Instead, on the day in the world of retail, members of Clan McCustomer wander in a daze from shop to shop, looking for elusive bargains. Buy one for £1 or two for £2, scream the sales banners. It's no surprise that I can hardly contain my excitement. On the interwebs, though, it's a slightly more feverish matter. There are bargains to hunt and slay and hang over the fireplace. My rule is cut of obvious cloth. Buy what you were going to buy anyway. For over a year I had my eye on building a collection of dungeoneering figures. My outer space requirements were met by Starfinder's cardboard pawn collection. I could have gone down the Pathfinder route and picked up sword and sorcery cardboard ranks as well, but I felt the siren song of paint calling to me once more. In dungeon terms, the scheme was to buy in a small army of figures for use as player characters, and a varied force of creatures. We can't label them monsters. Monsters are simply misunderstood heroes, battling against the winners who write dungeoneering history. I turned to a company called Otherworld Miniatures. They had enough variety to cover heroes and monsters. I do beg your pudding. Villains who kill monsters and take their stuff on the one hand, and misunderstood creatures on the other. I was always going to buy these. It was simply a matter of timing. Around the Black Friday period, and online that period is a month, I happened to glance at the site thinking I might use the voucher scheme. Pay for a voucher and receive a bunch of miniatures free. The voucher deal terminated at year's end, and I wondered if I could take advantage of that before the clock struck 12. In looking at that offer again, I saw an incompatible offer: half-price sale and a small army of figures. Do the voucher deal, or opt for the half-price sale. I was planning on taking the voucher deal and purchasing boxed sets of character figures, leaving the monsters for another time. Yet here were all these monsters, nay, misrepresented creatures, and they marched to the half-price tune. When buying things in a sale, buy what you would have bought anyway, and so I bought a load of things at half price. I don't understand the urge to rush into gladiatorial combat to wrestle over a television set that I don't need and wasn't going to buy, based on the notion that there's a slice of money off. My plans, based loosely on timing and opportunity, kicked in. I bought pretty much what I'd have bought anyway. The sale allowed me to pick up multiple packs of a few items, so I'd have reasonable numbers of foes for dungeoneering mass murderers to meet in combat. I mean, for dungeoneering diplomats to meet in protracted negotiations. Did I buy what I'd have bought in any case? Yes, though I added a case to keep the loot in. Buying figures is about buying storage for your figures. I stuck to the overall plan. Cardboard pawns for Starfinder, plastic, resin and metal figures for the two other areas, dungeoneering and pulp action adventure. Almost everything you see here is metal. There are plastic stands for the figures and plastic stands with poles for flying or floating figures. Conspicuous by size, shape and material is the giant worm. That's a hard resin model that will take a bit of fixing to send down the dungeon. Needless to say, there's more than a hint of toil in preparing metal miniatures for use in role-playing games. No matter the size of your purchase, check to see if all the bits and pieces are there and in good condition. This took me quite a while. As the order was sizable, the company threw in the odd extra piece. I'd ordered the mule handler at half price and neglected to purchase a mule. The sale blinkers were on and those mules weren't part of the plan. Luckily, the company threw in a free mule. Otherwise, I'd have had a man with an invisible pet on the end of his rope. Yes, I'd have made that work. Large orders get the better of you. If I'd opted for the voucher deal, I'd have picked up a few boxed sets of Dungeoneers. No difficulty in ordering. Straightforward. At least I tell myself that. What did I buy? Figures with metal bars at the bottom instead of full bases. These fit into the slotted plastic bases. Some models are more complex and fit on plain plastic bases without slots, and other models are far simpler simpler and also fit on plain plastic bases. A few figures came with their own metal bases, but there were enough plastic bases in the order to cater to those too. The idea is to glue the metal base to the plastic base and then slot the plastic base into a figure holder for painting. Do not slot metal bases into those spring-loaded figure holders. The tension is bound to put the model under pressure and deform the thinner metal bases out there. Just go old school and blue tack a completely metal figure onto the end of a cork and paint away if you aren't going to glue a metal figure to a chunk of plastic base. Speaking of plastic, these figures are in bags that aren't usable for finished figure storage. Luckily, aside from role-playing games, this channel covers board games, and I've already used a pile of these surplus bags to kit out board games that were lacking in that department. What doesn't work for figure storage works a treat for keeping cardboard counters separate. To get back into painting, I've built up a modular craft and hobby station, leaving me plenty of storage options for these seemingly endless bags. That's a Hobby Zone modular drawer set. You'll see more of those modules in a forthcoming video about splashing wood glue all over the town. There's a world of preparation involved in turning this jumbo stash into a painted force, sorting out bases, trimming away flash and assorted imperfections in the manufacturing process, checking for prominent mould lines, taking a forest of blades and other tools to these miniatures, considering glue and putty options. Yes, I'll be drilling and pinning bits and pieces for the larger or more awkward multi-part miniatures. The secret to all this is no secret. Have the tools ready for the job and set up production lines. Trim flash away first, fix bases in place, leave the multi-part figures to one side and handle pinning separately. Drink coffee away from the work area. It's daunting for a beginner. A beginner should buy a single box of figures and have at it. At least that way you'll discover the best pace to work at, and you'll gain an idea of how many figures you can prepare and paint over a wet weekend. The largest army of figures painted at a single sitting was the army of robomechanoids, underminers of the Overlorders, a Warhammer 40k swarm that achieved artificial intelligence and painted itself before storming across the galaxy in search of a new base. A hexagonal one. And that is a tabletop gaming fact. Start with a budget. Outline your requirements in terms of theme and number of figures. Hunt for bargains across the great retail plains. Buy what you were for buying in any case. And buy a case. Yes, you should already have shelves on standby. Kit out a workplace. Make sure it is level, lit, ventilated, and free of random disturbance. Start small. Learn pacing. Watch a million videos on the hobby. When the knives come out, always cut away from yourself. Never make a video in which you tell people to always cut away from yourself if you include footage of cutting in the direction of your own blood bag body. This hobby within a hobby is going to keep you busy. I know that, as someone from the company scribbled that comment on the invoice. Once upon a role-playing game, there was no side industry that catered to producing fantasy-themed metal miniatures for the RPG crowd. That time is no more. Plastic and resin joined the party, and here we are with a dedicated industry serving gamers with a billion videos on how to paint every damned thing. Your initial choice is whether or not to use miniatures. Then you're faced with the plastic side of things or the metal. I recommend buying plastic, resin, or whatever you think you can assemble and paint. Cardboard pawns don't need painting at all. Some assembly required. Unusually, I opted for a few pieces of dungeon terrain. Fountains, braziers, dungeon stores. I should point out the two grey resin bases. They weren't produced by Otherworld Miniatures, but by Dark Art Miniatures. One base is for another project, and I added a multi-part Otherworld miniature to a Dark Art base just to see if it would match up well. Match up? It did. It'll take some time to return to this unprepared, unpainted pile of loot and show you what I've done with it. The main difficulty is that the video studio is separate from the painting studio. This situation is likely to remain the same, no matter what I construct and paint. I'm not a fan of watching paint dry in videos, and I'm certainly no fan of daubing paint all over my cameras. Best to settle for the difficulty of daubing paint all over figures instead.